taking on Module 5 and discussing the Cold War history and engineering before the Cold War. So the Cold War lasted between 1945 and 1991, and there was high tension between the Soviet Union and the United States. And while they were allies during the war, they did not trust each other at all. This is actually the time that the U.S. decided to not demobilize its military despite the war being over and there being peace. This was the first time that the U.S. actually spent more on military spending. And this was all due to a race against the Soviet Union on who could be the first to space and also who could have the most nuclear weapons. And this was all to do with wanting to become the global superpower. Next, we're going to talk about engineering and military before the Cold War. This happened in 4 phases. The first phase was between 1800 and 1860, and this was the more industrialization of gun manufacturing, so more of a one-size-fits-all instead of custom-made guns. The second phase, between 1860 and 1914, the only true change to engineering was that engineers were getting more educated with the Morrill Land Grant Act. The third phase, between 1914 and 1945, was during the World Wars, and this is when the military gave contracts to independent inventors such as Thomas Edison. And these contracts actually ended after World War I. World War II gave the rise to new technologies like jets and cooperation between engineers and the government. This was during the time that the MIT-Rad Lab and the Manhattan Project, i.e. the creation of the first atomic bomb, happened. This required massive investments, and more than 100,000 people were involved just in the Manhattan Project alone. So there was more collaboration between engineers and militaries. The fourth phase was between 1945 and 1989, and this was the period of computing, which was funded to calculate artillery and fire in tables. And this was later used to calculate nuclear weapons. And so that is engineering before the Cold War.